Congratulations! You've made it to the end of world history. This is the last flipped video for this unit. Today we're going to be talking about today's world, modern world. The world today is changing at a rapid pace. People are working together to promote economic development, eliminate threats to global security, and protect the environment and advance science and technology. The essential question that we're going to focus on in this video is how does economic interdependence affect countries around the world, and how does globalization lead to cultural diffusion? Golden Hawk historians will describe significant characteristics of global connections created by technological change and how those changes have affected culture, and analyze how the changing and competing cultures have led to current global issues and conflicts. While you're watching, make sure that you're taking notes in either Cornell or outline format as we've talked about in class. It's okay if you need to pause or rewind the video in order to make sure that you're taking good notes. At the beginning of the 21st century, the world was divided over a number of political, cultural, and economic issues. The Cold War was just ending, terrorism was on the rise, but countries were interconnected like never before. Globalization is the process in which trade and culture link together countries around the world. Improvements in transportation and communication in recent years have made global trade much easier. Interdependence is a relationship among countries in which they depend on one another for resources, goods, and services. Many countries don't provide all of the goods and services or resources that their country will need to survive, so they have to provide those with other countries. Goods and services a nation can provide and those that it needs depend on the level of economic development in that country. Developed countries, or what you might have heard of called first world countries, are industrialized nations with strong economies and access to good healthcare, education, and technology. Developing countries, or what you might have heard called third world countries, are those with less productive economies and lack of access to education and healthcare. Many of the developing countries suffer from great poverty, lack of political and social stability, and ongoing war or other conflict that may keep it in a developing state. One effect of economic interdependence is that certain events or actions can affect the economies of many nations. For example, in 2008, during the economic crisis here in the United States, there was a world economic crisis as well, and many European countries were also struggling. Free trade is the exchange of goods among nations without trade barriers, such as tariffs. Supporters of free trade believe that it gives producers more markets in which to sell goods and allows consumers to purchase high-quality goods at lower prices. For example, the United States is a part of NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, in which we have opened free trade between Mexico and Canada. A variety of international trade organizations exist today, many of which work to promote and regulate free trade. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or the GATT Treaty, in which member countries work to limit trade barriers and settle any sorts of trade disputes. GATT was replaced a little bit later with the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, which monitors national trade policies and helps to resolve any trade disputes that might occur. Many countries belong to at least one regional trade bloc or group in which they form to promote free trade and deal with economic issues with neighboring nations. The largest regional trade bloc is the European Union that involves most of the countries in Europe. They work together for economic and political integration. In the last couple of years, the United Nations has broken apart from the UK has broken apart from the European Union and formed its own. This was called Brexit. Organizations like the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, also called IMF, and the World Bank help to regulate the global economy and help nations in crisis when they are having economic issues. With globalizations, countries are linked not only through trade but also culture. Popular culture refers to cultural traits such as food, sports, and music that are common within a group of people. In the top right-hand corner, you'll recognize some of the characters there. R2-D2, the Joker, Willy Wonka, Marilyn Monroe. Many of those characters are considered popular culture. Globalization is causing cultural diffusion or the spread of cultural traits from one region to another. Modern methods of transportation and communication allow the exchange of ideas and customs to happen faster than ever before. Think internet, cell phones, travel, airplanes, etc. One of the greatest challenges of globalization may be to preserve valuable traditional cultures and at the same time provide enrichment from other places around the world. For example, many of the languages that were once around the world are now disappearing quickly. Violence and human rights abuses are not new, but globalization has made the world even more aware of such events. Newspapers and instant access to information and news has allowed us to have more contact with other nations and kind of see what's going on there. Think the ongoing crisis in Syria. In spite of agreements made at the United Nations, torture, slavery, killing, and other human rights abuses are daily occurrences in some countries. Most of these countries are developing countries and are struggling to create a climate of political stability. Many groups called non-governmental organizations or NGOs, kind of like the Red Cross or the Samaritan's Purse, work to provide services or promote certain public policies to improve the lives of women, children, and indigenous people or people that originally lived there. Poverty is caused by a lack of natural resources, wars, poor government planning, and rapid population growth. One of the results of poverty can be famine or an extreme shortage of food. At this point, other countries, such as developed countries such as the United States or many European countries, give or loan billions of dollars every year to poor countries to help provide the resources that they need. Globalization has made controlling disease a challenge for the entire world as well. International air travel allows diseases to spread rapidly as infected people move from place to place. Think the most recent crisis with the Zika virus in the South American countries. It's quickly spread to the United States. An epidemic is an outbreak of contagious disease that spreads quickly and affects many people. The most recent event of an epidemic was the bird flu and the pig flu, swine flu, that was a couple years ago. International health organizations and local governments have had some success at controlling the spread of certain diseases. Much of the success has come from educating people about the prevention of disease and making medicines cheaper and more available. Other global challenges are natural disasters. Natural disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and floods affect many areas of the world, often causing deaths and destroying homes and businesses. The picture below is from the tsunami that affected most of Asia in 2004. Over 3,000 people died as a part of that tsunami. Terrorism is the unlawful use or threat of violence to cause fear and to advance political, religious, or ideological goals. Terrorists often intentionally target unarmed and unsuspecting civilians during their attacks. Over the last few years, the United States has experienced coupled terrorist attacks related to fundamental Islam. Over the past few decades, the number of worldwide terrorist attacks has increased, as has the violence of these attacks. In Latin America, terrorism was connected to the illegal drug trade and is a major problem in Colombia and Peru. In Great Britain, the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA, for many years engaged in terrorist attacks on British targets in an attempt to end British control of Northern Ireland. The Middle East, for the most part, has become a focus of efforts against international terrorist groups. The ongoing Arab-Israeli conflict within Palestine and Israel is the region, as well as the region's history of Western colonial domination, has led to resentment of the West among some Arabs. Many Arabic people have a not so great opinion of Western nations like the United States, Great Britain, and Germany, which is why we've also seen an increase in terrorist attacks in those countries. Some groups, such as Hezbollah, are viewed as a legitimate resistance movement against Israel and are actually hailed as heroes in their hometowns. Following 9/11, the U.S. government took many actions to prevent future terrorist attacks. They passed new legislation to help strengthen international and domestic intelligence services, and they also established the Department of Homeland Security to help protect the United States against attacks. Weapons of mass destruction have become more of a concern in recent times. Weapons of mass destruction are weapons that include biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons that can cause an enormous amount of destruction. In most recent years, the biggest fear has been nuclear. Biological weapons are made with organisms or toxins found in nature and include diseases and poisons such as anthrax, plague, and smallpox. Chemical weapons, such as mustard gas that was used during World War II, and nerve gas, use chemical toxins to kill or injure. Nuclear weapons are the biggest threat to the world currently. Many countries are now using nuclear power as a way to help more cleanly fuel their areas, but the United States, the Soviet Union, and 60 other nations signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that looked at nuclear weapons as opposed to nuclear power. The Non-Proliferation Treaty was an arms-controlled agreement that was meant to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. Many countries have started to place sanctions or economic and political penalties imposed by one country on another, or on countries that they might consider a nuclear threat. Sanctions are now the way that we kind of push people into doing what we need them to do. Ethnic and religious conflicts are a threat because they create a willingness to destroy or kill. In 1994, in Rwanda, tensions between the Tutsi and the Hutu ethnic groups led to massacres in which 1 million people were killed. Some of you may have seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, which is a story of a man who helps protect people during that conflict. In the early 2000s in Darfur, Arab militias, which were supported by the government, attacked African villages and looted and destroyed their homes. Over 400,000 people were killed in that effort. Sustainable development is economic development that does not permanently damage resources. You might have heard about sustainability over the last couple of years. With sustainable development, people are trying to balance out the need for development, meaning like building new cities and like inventions like cars and stuff, with the protection of the environment. In some areas, the world, people might seek to protect resources by limiting their use or by setting aside areas where no development is allowed. For example, France has instituted a policy where once a year there's no cars used. In areas of Latin America, Asia, and Africa, deforestation, or the clearing of trees, is taking place at a rapid rate to clear the land for farming or cattle ranching. In West Africa, people are struggling with desertification, or the spread of desert-like conditions caused by drought. Pollution did not become a serious issue until the Industrial Revolution, but by the 1960s, pollution had increased so much that some scientists have begun to see it as a growing threat to human survival. One of the most recent conflicts is over the issue of global warming, or the rise in the surface temperature of Earth over time. Some of the greatest discoveries and scientific advances in recent years have come from space exploration. Much of the data collected from satellites and during space shuttle missions have given scientists new information about the origins and development of stars, galaxies, and planets. For example, in my childhood, the most big development in space was that Pluto was no longer a planet. Space exploration has also led to the development of technologies that are used today, such as scratch-resistant eyeglass lenses and farther flying golf balls. The exchange of information is such an important part of modern life that some people say that we are living in the information age. We now have access to information in the blink of an eye. Space satellites transmit the signals for cell phones and satellite television, both of which have become increasingly common around the world. Personal computers and the internet link people, educational institutions, businesses, and governments around the world, allowing for instant communication. If you send a text message in the United States, it'll automatically be sent to anywhere in the world. However, there is a pretty big digital divide between areas in which there is access to the internet and other information technologies and areas where there are not. In this picture, you can kind of see where the global digital divide is. The areas that are darker, like the United States, Europe, and Australia, and South Korea and Japan, they have pretty instant access to the internet. Internet access is very, very available to them. There's lots of computers. They have availability to get on the internet at any time. The areas that are the next darkest, like Russia, Brazil, and other countries, they have less computers. The countries that have the least amount of computers are the areas that are in light yellow. So that includes much of Africa and some parts of South America. Thank you for joining me for this video, and congratulations, you are now done with world history. Make sure that you read back over your notes that have all the necessary vocabulary, and I'll see you in class.